Happy Monday! Welcome back to Drinking by My Shelf. My name is Emma, and in this video I'm talking about books that I did not think I would like at all, but then turned out to love them. Sometimes it happens. We think we know our reading tastes, and sometimes we are just plain wrong. I should use this as a reason to push myself out of my comfort zone more often, but let's be real, I'm probably not going to do that. So in no particular order, the first book I have on this list is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Jenkins Reid. I was sent a proof of this in 2016, so like 4 years ago, unsolicited. It was when I was writing for Bustle, and this proof just arrived as a book that I might want to review on Bustle, and I was just not interested. It wasn't this copy, this is like my finished copy that I bought, but the proof looked pretty much like the American cover. I'll put that there so you can see what that looked like. And you know what, I was just being snobby and I was being judgy, and I didn't think it was going to be my thing. I thought it looked too like trashy beach read, and I was doing my masters at the time, and I was like, you know what, I'm too much of a serious literary reader for this book, so I was just not really interested. But I gave it a go one day. I can't even remember what made me decide to pick it up. I gave it a go and I fell in love with it. I don't need to tell you about this book because all of BookTube has been talking about it for pretty much the entire 4 years since then. But it is like a fun beach read. It is really accessible. It is like an easy read, but it goes so deep and it like covers so many issues that I care so much about. So we have a bisexual main character. It's about feminism. It's about sexism in Hollywood and betrayal of women. It's like, I don't even know. It's got so much going on. So if you're feeling snobby and judgy about this one, don't pick it up. And also, lesson to myself, just don't be snobby and judgy in general about books, because actually, who do I think I am? I don't need books to be like on the Booker Prize shortlist for me to read them. I'm not that smart. Okay, but then talking about books that were on the Booker Prize shortlist, A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. So I read this one when it was picked for my book club that I just have with my friends from uni. One of the girls picked it and I made such a fuss. I did not want to read this book. It wasn't that I didn't think it would be good, it was that it's like 720 pages long, and I had just at that point started a job. I can't remember which job I was doing. I just started one of my jobs in publishing and I was having to read a lot for work, and I just was like, I don't have time to read 720 pages of this book that all I've heard about it is that it's unrelentingly sad, and I don't want to be that sad. So I made a whole fuss about it, didn't want to read it. Even for the first, to be honest, couple hundred pages, I was still making a fuss because I feel like there could have been some cuts in there. But suddenly, like 200 pages in, I was hooked, and then it became one of my favourite books that I've ever read. I gave it 5 stars. I actually feel like I'm really ready for a reread of this book now, and I'll probably like those beginning pages now that I like care about the characters. It's beautiful, it's so good, and it's not unrelentingly sad. It is incredibly sad, I'm sure you know, because everyone's been doing those like reading vlogs of it and just sobbing, so I'm sure you've seen those and you know that it is incredibly sad. But I actually found it a really beautiful, hopeful book, and that's not to say it has a happy, hopeful ending, because it doesn't, but I drew something really beautiful from it. So yeah, I loved it. And then while we're talking about my book club, the most recent pick that was chosen for that, one of the girls chose The Spy and the Traitor by Ben Macintyre, which again, I made a real fuss because it was non-fiction, which I don't really like, history, which I don't really like, action, spies and stuff, which I don't really like, and about men, which I don't really like. So I was like, there's nothing in this book for me, I don't want to read it, and I really put it off until the last minute. And again, even when I started it, the first few pages I was like, I'm so bored, I don't like history, I don't like facts and all of this stuff, and then I suddenly realised it was such an interesting story. So this is the true story of, obviously the true story is non-fiction, of a double agent. His name was Oleg Gordievsky, and he was a member of the KGB who then got recruited by MI6 to be a double agent, and it's such a tense story. So we know right from the beginning that he's going to be found out, or he's going to be suspected, and so it's going to be the story of him having to escape from the KGB's clutches, and it's like, it's so good. It's one of those stories that you can't believe it's real. I don't think I knew very much about spies and what they actually did in real life, and it turns out that it's like way better than what they do in the movies. The movies are boring, the real life was so interesting. My enjoyment of it was to the extent of it is a non-fiction book. It's never my favourite reading experience, but I absolutely loved learning this story, and I feel like they should make like a Netflix TV show about it. Okay, then I've got Anne of the Island by L.M. Montgomery. So if you haven't seen already, I did a video recently where I read all 8 books in the Anne of Green Gables series in one weekend. and really enjoyed the series as a whole, but the books are all quite different from each other. And when I got to this one, which is number 3, you'll actually see in the video I say going into it that I don't think I'm going to like it, because at this point Anne is quite grown up. When we first meet her in Anne of Green Gables, she's obviously a kid and like she's getting up to all these funny adventures, and here she is going off to college, and I just thought I was going to find it boring, but I did not. It ended up being like my favourite one in the whole series. It's so much fun, it's so romantic. We get all this fun storyline of her living with her friends from college, and they have this like house of girls, and it's just great. Again, you'll see on the video me just like jumping up and down with joy throughout this book. I have another book here that's a bit like A Little Life, in that I didn't think I was going to like it because I thought it would be depressing, and that is Patrick Melrose, the Patrick Melrose series. There are actually 5 books in the series, I think. I've only read the first 3 so far, which are the ones in volume 1, which is this. And this was one of the first books that I read having just got my job at Macmillan, because one of the first book break videos that I made was what is Patrick Melrose, because the TV show had just come out, so we wanted to do like a little introduction. And I thought this was going to be like a very serious, very sad story that I wouldn't really get on with, but it turns out it is a very sad story. It's a story of a boy who is abused by his father and grows up to become a drug addict, and a lot of it is based on Edward St. Aubyn, the author's real life, so it is very sad. What I wasn't expecting is that the way he tells the story is so entertaining. It's actually like laugh out loud funny. He writes these characters with like such a scathing wit. He is just like razor sharp about every single character in this book, so it turned out to be a really enjoyable read. That doesn't mean that it's not heavy, it doesn't mean that it doesn't contain like terrible things that happen, but it's just a lot more accessible than I thought it would be. And then again, talking of some more books that I didn't think would be that accessible, The Reluctant Fundamentalist by Mosine Hammett. I had this book in the back of my mind to read for about 12 years before I finally read it, because I thought it was just going to be really heavy and really serious and really hard to read. For some reason I thought that, and it wasn't at all. It's a very short, really easy to read book. It is a challenging, thought-provoking book, but that's not because the writing is hard, it's just because it leaves you with so many questions in your head. The book is all told as one half of a conversation, so we are hearing the main character Changas, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He is in a cafe in Pakistan, and he comes over and sits with an American man and starts talking to him, and so we hear his side of the conversation, and there are certain points when we assume that the American man has replied because our character seems to respond to him, but we never get to hear that. And it's all about prejudice. So our main character was from Pakistan, moved to the States and lived there for a long time before coming back, and we see him becoming incredibly disillusioned with America because of the treatment that he receives there and what he sees there. And it's a really, really interesting story that gets darker and darker as it goes along and builds to this fantastic ending. I thought it was brilliant, an ending that I have not stopped thinking about, where you are really forced to question yourself. It's just brilliant, but it is not an inaccessible book at all. Likewise, this one, Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl by Andrea Lawlor. So I didn't think this was going to be like serious or heavy. I just thought it was going to be very literary and very cool. I thought it was going to be like too cool for me, but it turns out it's not that cool. No, it is. It's a very cool book, but it's a really, really fun book. So this is about our main character Paul, who is a shapeshifter and can shape his body at will and his gender, and it's set in the 90s, and it's like this tour through different 90s queer subcultures and how Paul can access all of them by changing his body and the way he identifies and presents himself. So it's just like this really fun book that plays with gender in so many different ways. And I don't know why I thought I wouldn't be able to get on with it or understand it, because I loved it. It was so much fun. The main character Paul is like deliberately insufferable, but also I loved him. And it's like very, very smarty. Okay, then some books that I thought I wouldn't like because of the genre. I have these 2 books by Blake Crouch, Recursion and Dark Matter. These are both sci-fi, like technology sci-fi books, and I never read sci-fi, so I didn't think they'd be my thing, but I gave them a go and loved both of them. Particularly Recursion was so much fun. Both of them, they're sci-fi, but sci-fi that's like set in our world with a twist. Like you find out the existence of some extra technology, but the rest of the world is familiar as our world, which is exactly the level I like to read at. And it turns out they were really fun, like page-turning sci-fi tech thrillers. And even though when I first started with Dark Matter, at the beginning I was like, nope, this isn't for me, I cannot cope with this level of intense science fiction, I'm not going to get on with this book, I then got completely hooked. tore through this one and now will fully read whatever he writes next. Similarly, some horror books that I did not think I was going to like. I read these because we made a book break video on horror, so I thought I should brush up a bit because I never read horror, and I really did not think that I was going to like it. I love thrillers, I don't like supernatural stuff, but I read Pet Sematary by Stephen King and Nosferatu by Joe Hill, who is Stephen King's son, and I really enjoyed both of them. They were so much fun. Particularly Pet Sematary, which is so creepy. Stephen King, I think, said that this one is, he thinks, like the most horrible book he's ever written. And it is. It's like so horrible what the concept of this book is. But I loved it, and it was not what I expected. The pacing is very different than I thought. It's actually very slow. Not much of the like truly horrible stuff happens until the end, but by then you're so like tense and ready for it. I just thought it was brilliant. Nosferatu, even more not my usual thing, because it's like action packed. We have this girl who has a magic motorbike, or like she finds a magic bridge that she rides her motorbike along that can take her to different worlds and different places. She ends up on the bad side of this serial killing vampire who's stealing children. There is so much going on. It's like action, 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 vampires, everything that I don't like, blood on the front cover, and I hate gory stuff. But I loved it. I found it really genuinely very fun. I think there's a TV show of this. It doesn't say on the book there is. I just think that there is a TV show, or there's one coming. Historical fiction is a genre that for a long time I wrote off and said that I didn't like, but then I read The Glovemaker by Ann Weisgarber and absolutely loved it. And now I do read quite a lot of historical fiction. I'm still quite picky, I think, about historical fiction. There's some eras maybe that I'm not that interested in, but thanks to The Glovemaker, I'm now way more likely to try out historical fiction. And I loved this one. I think partly because it was set in an era and a place that I didn't know much about at all. So when is it? 1888, and it's set in this Mormon village in Utah in the snow, so it's really tense and claustrophobic. The story is of our main character whose husband has been away travelling for work, and he was supposed to come back, but he isn't back yet, and the snow is just coming and coming, and as the book goes on, you're more and more nervous about what might have happened to him, but we are getting these letters that are arriving that he had sent before, so we get to see a lot of their love for each other, and so you really, really are rooting for his safe return. Meanwhile, his wife, who's stuck waiting from at home, meets this man who is on the run from the law, and she helps him. And that's where it becomes really tense and claustrophobic, is we have this tiny town, but everyone can see everyone. It's snowing, so your tracks are literally on the ground. You can't get anywhere without people seeing, and she has to help this man run away. So it was so much fun. I really, really enjoyed it. Such a page turner and a little insight into a world that I had never read a book set in before. Okay, we're nearly there, I promise. Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi. This was the first Helen Oyeyemi book I read, and the reason I thought I wasn't going to like it is because I didn't like it when I first read it. I didn't know what to expect. I had never read Helen Oyeyemi's very strange style before, and I think I read about 3/4 of the book, wasn't getting into it, couldn't understand what was happening, and so put it down to read something else for a bit. Then, about 2 or 3 weeks later, I decided to finish it off, but I couldn't remember where I'd got up to because I hadn't been understanding it, so I literally just started from the beginning again, which I have never done with a book. Usually I would just DNF it, but for some reason I was intrigued about this one and I decided to start from the beginning. And the second time around, I adored it. Suddenly I was so captivated by this strange, magical, bizarre story. I think Helen Oyeyemi's writing really does that. It works better and better every time you read it. So I've now read a lot of her books, and this one is still my favourite, I think, because I read it twice, and I'm really tempted to reread the other ones I've read and see what I uncover on the second reading. So that's not going to be for everyone. Not everyone has the time and patience to read a book twice, but I'm so glad I did with this very strange, beautiful book. And then finally, the last book on this list is for a slightly different reason. So this is Saving Francesca by Melina Marchetta. And it's not that I didn't think I would like this book, it's just that my friend gave this to me and said it was her absolute favourite childhood book when she was growing up. It was like her equivalent of what Ella Enchanted is to me. And reading somebody else's beloved book is such a lot of pressure. It's so high stakes. And so I was just really nervous reading this book. I didn't not think I was going to like it. I just didn't know if I was going to like it. And I was so nervous about it that I hyped it up a lot. Turns out, luckily, I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It's a YA book about a group of friends at a school. Nothing particularly unique or unusual there. But with this one, it was just, the characters were so lovable. Their friendship was so fun to read about. And the book does hit harder issues. So our main character's mother has depression, and we get to follow that and the effect on the mother, the effect on the daughter. So it's just a really beautiful, emotional book, and also like a lot of fun. So I can really see why this was her favourite growing up. I think it's quite rare to read, well, it's rare for me to read a YA book for the first time at this age and fall in love with it. Like, usually I would reread them for nostalgia reasons, or they're just not really for me. But this one really stood the test of time. Me reading it at this age for the first time, I still loved it. So there you go, a bunch of books that I didn't think I was going to like, but I still did. Let me know which books you were convinced you weren't going to like and ended up being positive surprises for you. Have I done a video before that's the other way around, on books I thought I was going to like but didn't? I feel like a lot of people have done that, like disappointing books, but maybe I will give that one a go next. So have a great week, everybody, and I will see you soon. Bye!